Okie doke. Hey, everybody. Welcome to chapter 10. I've gone through 96.9 different versions of cameras and capturing computer screens and microphones and all kinds of stuff. And this is as good as I've figured out yet. So I hope this works for you. You will hear the audio coming from the chapter, but it's actually just being picked up by my mic. If somebody's got a better idea, let me know. Anyway, here we are in chapter 10. Chapter 10 is about form. Form, as I mentioned in the introduction, is one of our big important words when we discuss music. Of course, melody is huge, harmony, rhythm, how things are placed in time, and then I'd put form as number 4 of the big words when it comes to music. Form is how a piece is structured, and you can talk about structures in a lot of ways. You can talk about big structures like whole sections, verses and choruses and AABA and all that. We're going to talk about structure in terms of phrases, just a single musical phrase, a single idea. And phrases are marked with cadences. I'm not going to read the chapter for you. I'm expecting you're going to do that. So I'm just going to flip through and I'll talk a little about cadences. Cadences are the few chords at the end of a musical phrase that concludes the phrase. The first cadence they talk about here, they talk about an authentic cadence. Authentic cadences involve something from the 5 family, that means 5 or 7 diminished, and then heading to a 1 chord. The most perfect of all authentic cadences is the perfect authentic cadence. The perfect authentic cadence has a root position 5 chord. Here we are in the key of E minor. This is a root position 5 chord going to a root position 1 chord. And notice that do is in the soprano. You need those 3 things to have a perfect authentic cadence. Again, an authentic cadence involves 5 chordness to 1 chordness, or 7 diminished to 1. That's the ness part. And on that 1 chord, you must have do in the soprano. That is the most perfect and the most conclusive sounding cadence you can have. So let's hear this Bach that ends with a 5-1.
Example 10-1.
It's very done. There was do in the soprano, root position 5, root position 1. That's a perfect authentic cadence. And again, a cadence is what marks the end of a musical phrase. Most of the phrases we'll be looking at, and most of the phrases in classical music, tend to be 4 bars, 8 bars, somewhere in there. The imperfect authentic cadence. There are different types of imperfect authentic cadences. As you might imagine, anything that doesn't have root position 5 to root position 1, ending with do in the soprano, would be considered imperfect. Maybe it's an inverted 5 chord. Maybe it's an inverted 1 chord. Maybe it's a 7 diminished. Maybe it doesn't have do in the soprano. So any of those things make an authentic cadence imperfect, such as a root position 5 and 1, like this here. Root position 5 and 1, but do is not in the soprano. So that's considered imperfect, but it still has the root position chords. So it's called a root position imperfect authentic cadence. Listen to how the soprano goes up at the end. Instead of going to do, goes up to mi, we're in A flat, and it makes the cadence sound slightly incomplete.
Example 10-2.
By having the soprano go up to mi at the end there, it makes it sound slightly incomplete. The second example of an imperfect authentic cadence is the inverted IAC. So in this case, We have a root position, or sorry, we have a root position 1, but we don't have a root position 5. We're in the key of C major. In addition to that, there's also mi in the soprano. So that would also mean that it's imperfect. But in this case, they're pointing out the fact that the 5 chord is inverted. And again, we are looking at less stable, less conclusive type sounds. And you'll see why we would use these cadences a little bit later.
Example 10-3.
All righty, inverted IAC. Leading tone IAC, like I've said a couple times now, sometimes an authentic cadence will use the 7 diminished instead of the 5 chord. And that gives you what's called a leading tone, because it's a leading tone chord, leading tone IAC. And let's listen to that one.
Example 10-4.
I know, it sounded pretty conclusive to me with that little plagal 4 chord dealy. But anyway, the 7 diminished preceding the 1 makes it an imperfect authentic cadence. Moving on. You'll recognize this. We've talked about the deceptive progression many times. And the deceptive progression can be used in a cadential manner as well, meaning it's at the end of a phrase. Here's a 4-bar phrase that ends with 5-7 going to 6. And the reason that this is considered a cadence versus just the standard deceptive progression is that there is a moment of arrival. Remember that cadences are marking the end of a phrase, so there must be a moment of arrival. So we're really arriving on this 6 chord. And we will label that then as a DC, a deceptive cadence, 5-7 going to 6. Let's listen to it.
Example 10-5.
And I like what they say here. A deceptive progression is often used not to really end a phrase, but to extend it a few measures until it reaches the true cadence. So we cadence, we arrive on it, but again, there's that sense of feeling undone. So it's a way of extending. And like I've mentioned before, the deceptive cadence in a major key will darken the sun a little bit when the 6th chord arrives. It makes everybody go, oh, bummer. But when you do a deceptive cadence in a minor key, you're expecting that minor 1 chord, but that major 6 comes out. Then the clouds part, little sunshine. But then the ultimate letdown when you finally do end on a minor 1 chord. All right. A half cadence is when we end a phrase with a 5 chord. And as you might imagine, it's called a half cadence because it sounds like you're halfway there. If you end a phrase on a 5 chord, it's very clear that there's more to come. And many times the 5 chord is used in a very symmetrical way, meaning that this phrase will be followed by another phrase of the same length, but the next time you're going to end with a more authentic cadence. Let's listen to this half cadence ending with a 5 chord.
Example 10-6.
That surely doesn't sound finished, does it? No, that's a half cadence. Halfway there. Phrygian half cadence is a specific type of half cadence. It's a half cadence all the same, which means it ends with a 5 chord. But the Phrygian half cadence has this minor 4 preceding the 5, and in particular, minor 4 in first inversion preceding the 5. It has a lay sol voice leading in the bass line. Lay sol. And da, 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 da. That Phrygian sound is that half step. So that's why it's called the Phrygian half cadence, because it has a half step motion in the bass. And only happens in a minor key. Minor 4/6 going to 5.
Example 10-7.
And did you hear lay sol? That was in the bass. And that's, again, that Phrygian sound, that half step. The Phrygian mode is defined in its sound by a half step between the first and second scale degrees. So the Phrygian half cadence. Plagal cadence. The plagal cadence is also known as the Amen cadence. It's the sound of a 4 chord going to a 1 chord. And it's used often as a tag, like it is here in this example, a little tag that's attached to the end of a phrase. It's called the plagal cadence, 4 going to 1. We're going to use PC to label a plagal cadence.
Example 10-8.
Very nice. All right, so a little recap of cadences here. Authentic cadence contains the leading tone. It's on its way to the tonic. Plagal cadence does not contain a leading tone, and it's on its way to the tonic chord. So both of those would end with 1. That's what they mean by that. Deceptive cadences end with a 6 chord, so it's not going to end with tonic harmony. And the half cadence ends with a 5 chord, so it's not going to end with tonic harmony. They like to put them in 2 groups, conclusive and progressive. Conclusive, authentic and plagal. Hey, we're done. Progressive, deceptive and half cadences. Hey, we still have work to do before we're done with this. Let's see if that wraps up cadences. Yeah, they talk about cadences and harmonic rhythm here. We like to end on strong beats. We've talked about this before. Here we are in 4/4 time. They're putting the 5 chord on beat 4. You could have the 5 chord on beat 3 as long as it stretches through 4, and then landing on the strong beat 1 in 3/4 time. Oftentimes, harmonic motion happens on beat 3, and then again, strong beat arrival on beat 1. And checkpoint, you could do that. Check yourself and see what you know about cadences. All right, I'll see you in the next video.